was at one time a great civilization in the Pacific called Mu, or Lemuria. Well, that's probably the worst thing you can say to an archaeologist, because they regard it as total fantasy, totally made-up nonsense. And I sympathize with them, because for many years, I didn't believe that such a place could possibly have existed either. Enough is known of the bottom of the Pacific to show there was never a continent there. However, with the end of the Cold War, something very interesting happened. When the Soviet Union was alive and well, or alive anyway, and in big competition with the United States, the Russians and the Americans were busily mapping the bottoms of the sea, you know, to fight each other's submarines and so on. So they made these highly detailed maps of the bottom of the Pacific and the Atlantic and the Indian Oceans. Well, when Russia collapsed, the Cold War was over with, and there was no need to keep this privileged information anymore. So Scripps Oceanographic, out in San Jose, California, released these maps to the general public, which means now that you can actually own these tremendously detailed maps of the bottom of the sea. And what they revealed was extremely interesting. In the Pacific, we now know, and I will show you on the reproduction of this map, there is not a sunken continent, but there is a sunken archipelago, which is almost as big. An archipelago, for those of you that are not familiar with it, is like a string of islands, dry islands, very closely related, and their base underwater is all contiguous. It's all related together. What these maps reveal are a series of huge archipelagos which are in shallow water and which oceanographers know sank very recently. So recently, they could have been occupied by human beings. So right away we thought, well, there's a candidate for Mu or Lemuria, but still doesn't prove anything. It's interesting, but this really existed. Then, in summer, last year only, some divers off the coast of Okinawa, South Japan, by accident, made one of the most fabulous discoveries ever. They found an underwater stone city, a magnificent city that stretches over 300 miles. It is from 100 feet to 20 feet below the surface, which means it's within sport diving range. It has been seen by hundreds of divers. It's been broadcast all over Japan and Europe. And what this city reveals is fabulous. It's hardly able to grok it. It's in great shape. It hasn't been destroyed by some cataclysm like a volcano or something. Either the water rose suddenly somehow, the sea level rose, or some volcanic plate dropped. No one knows how exactly. But this city is made up of an enormous 560-foot-long pyramid. It's not like a pyramid you see in Egypt. It's like a temple based upon other temples in a pyramidal form. You go further north, and there are these great avenues, boulevards, and streets, steps, archways. I'll show you the photographs now. I have some of the shots of this. And more sites are being found. First there was one site found, then there were 3 more. Now 8 different areas of this have been found over a 300-mile area. And that area of Okinawa is part of this great archipelago that sank. The very extreme Asian end of it. And as underwater explorers continue, hopefully, almost for sure, they're going to find more of these. Now, is this Lemuria under the water? Well, if it isn't, I don't know what else it could possibly be. Now, it looks as though there is real physical evidence for this great civilization that flourished at one time. I can say, too, that these buildings that are found underwater bear virtually no resemblance to anything in Japan. A little bit, but very, very little. They mostly resemble, strangely enough, structures you see on the west coast of the Americas. There's a real comparison between some of the things which I saw and photographed in Peru with which we have photographs underwater in Japan. So the theory, and a very plausible one, a very workable one, is that there was a Mu or Lemuria. By the way, that name recurs all through Asia. It recurs all through the Americas, where and the Native Americans as well talk about their ancestors coming from this place which they refer to as Mu, or variants of the name Mu. For example, there's a great city on the coast of Peru, and they call that Chanchan. It belonged to people who call themselves the Chimu. And on this, I've seen this place myself. It's available to anybody that goes there. On the walls of the city that belonged to the Chimu, which has just been unearthed from the desert, by the way. They've only seen the tops of it for years, and now archaeologists are brushing away the desert. And they revealed a very long mural on the side of a wall, which they call the Palace of the Governor, just as a name to tag on. And along the side of this wall, it appears to depict the different history of these people. And part of this long wall shows a series of pyramids underwater with fish swimming over the top. So the basic theory is this: if you put all the myths and everything together, that here was this great island empire, more than an island, almost a continent, which we do know really existed, which still exists, very shallow water. And on this island, mankind, it looks like, evolved more than just civilization, but developed races, specific races. And when this land began to suffer from some geologic catastrophe, began to sink, the people left. And they took all their high technology, their high spirituality, and their culture, and they came, many of them, to the Americas. Relatively few, for one reason or another, went out to what is now Melanesia. And the conditions there are very rough, very hard. And over years, over the time, the generations, the blacks there, they lost their civilization just in a fight for survival, and they got lower and lower. Whereas the blacks that went to Mexico found an environment far more conducive. The Valley of Mexico, you can do a lot of planning there. There they developed civilization, and it rose very high. What's interesting, too, is that in the past, only the past year, a number of skeletal remains have been found all along the West Coast,